What's up, y'all? Today I'm in San Antonio, Texas, and today I want to show you guys how I'm using my Nikon Z7 II and all the really cool autofocus features for smooth focus in my shots on a recent Kickstarter campaign that just got published and funded in 8 hours, which is really, really cool to hear and see. I'm gonna take you through some of the segments of the video and show you some behind the scenes that let you see how I'm using my focus points, what kind of focus points I'm using, and the kind of techniques I'm using to get my shots. I'm currently in Chatterbox Studios. You can see some of the microphones back here. And this is a podcast studio here in San Antonio, Texas. And you can actually rent and use their equipment to create your podcast, which is a pretty cool thing to have, especially in our city here in San Antonio, Texas. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I already posted a link and the video and a little explanation of what I was doing on my IGTV. But this is gonna be a more in-depth look at the autofocus functions of the Z7 II and how you can use those on your camera as well. Let me tell you really quickly about the gear that I used on the shoot. Lighting was just a single FS300 Nanlite. And then I had a Lux Cello RGB LED light that I was using as a rim light or to backlight some of the subjects to separate them from some of the backgrounds. I also used my Nikon Z7 II and a 24-70 2.8, a DJI Ronin RS2 for stabilization when I'm doing my walking shots or any kind of movement on my shots. I had one assistant. We did this in 22 hours. And I want to show you these shots now and some of the focus settings that I'm using on the Nikon Z7 II so you can actually see what that's like and how I'm negotiating some of these shots and deciding how I want to film them to get the best possible shot. Let's check it out here on the video now. You'll see that I'm using the 51.8S here, and the reason for switching over to that from the 24-70 2.8 is because I wanted a shallower depth of field for the character closer to camera. I wanted that person to be really out of focus, and then I'm using eye autofocus to just track the eye of the person facing the camera. Everything worked out really good. The in-camera stabilization worked amazing. I didn't have any kind of jitters. I wasn't moving very much. I was more or less doing like a side to side very slowly as the handshake initiated. And all I had to worry about was just timing my side to side motion with the handshake, and the camera did the rest when it was actually focusing on the eyes of the main talent. This shot right here is also an eye autofocus moment. I'm using the DJI Ronin RS2 again as my gimbal, and I'm actually sliding left to right and moving forward in some of these takes that we did. And I need the focus to always be on his eyes as he actually throws the not perfect device in the air. Let's take a look at the behind the scenes for this so you can see that. As I'm walking left to right and he puts his head down and then angles it back up, the eye autofocus is already tracking that eye and knocking it out immediately. The eye autofocus is fast. Even though he's looking down and then looks back up, the eye autofocus tracking system picks it up immediately and it's already sitting there in focus. One of the things that I'm noticing a lot with the eye autofocus system on the Z7 II is that even if the person is not directly looking at the camera, it's still trying to pick up that focus where it assumes the eyes are. So you'll see in this shot, he's actually in focus when his head is down and when his eyes come up. It's fast. And I really like that because then I can just focus on my movement, my little ninja walk, and get the shots to be nice and smooth while the eye autofocus does its work. Now, this is going to be one of the scenes where there was the most movement, and we're talking about a lot of head weaving and bobbing. This is a boxing studio, and one of the main talents that we were interviewing is actually a boxing coach. This guy's name is Tony, the Black Stallion, well known in San Antonio. He's a professional boxer as well. And you'll see in my movements, I'm actually tracking and moving back with him as he's working with his client. Now his head is moving and weaving back and forth. I'm framing the shot to where Tony's head is on the right side of the frame and the client's head is on the left side of the frame. Now I don't necessarily have to worry about anybody else's eyes being tracked, but it is possible if somebody walks out around the ring or somebody actually moves in that the eye could move over to their focus point. So one of the things that I'm doing is I'm switching between overall eye autofocus, which is looking at the entire frame, the entire sensor, or I'm moving over to the red bounding box that looks for eyes specifically within that area. There's two shots I want to look at actually. One of them is going to be where he's here hitting this bag, and you'll notice that his face disappears and comes back into frame several different times. The focus system is picking up that eye every single time he goes away and comes back in. Now on this particular shot where he's actually working with the client, which I just mentioned a second ago in the behind the scenes clip, you're going to see that I'm actually tracking him on the right side of the frame, and then I'm able to move left and right while still keeping the eye in focus. You'll see that the eye autofocus immediately picks up his eyes, and even with the client bobbing and weaving and him moving his head, it continues to track it, which is what we want to see. There's so many things that your attention is grabbing onto while you're filming this, from going through the shot list to directing the talent, coaching the talent, lighting, making sure that you actually have your settings correct based on what kind of lighting is in the scene. All that stuff wears down on you through an entire shoot, and this took 22 hours to film over 2 days. So being able to have some of these autofocus functions on my Z7 II was amazing to be able to get through this shoot a lot easier. If I didn't have those, I probably would have been a little bit more stressed. Let me show you guys the opening scene here. One of the guys that created Not Perfect is setting up his tie and using the device to make the tie. Let me show you in this particular scene what kind of things I'm doing to get the focus where I want it. I want to show you some behind the scenes for this so you can get an idea for what kind of features I'm using on the Z7 II to get my focus where I need it. So here you can see I'm using the DJI Ronin RS2 as my gimbal, and that holds the Z7 II perfectly. But look at this really quickly. You're going to see on this particular shot a yellow box around the tie. Focus point is actually following the tie as I move or as the client moves. It's really cool because you can actually track whatever you want just by tapping on it, and it will always try and focus on that point based on what it looks like. It doesn't have to be eyes to continue to track the focus. That's really cool for me. You'll also see in this shot what I'm using to light most of the scenes. I have the Lux Cello behind the client, rim lighting his left side, and then I'm using the 90 centimeter round modifier on a Nanlite FS300 to light them from above and from his left side as well. In each of those initial shots where he's tying the tie and placing it in certain parts of his body, I was actually able to use the Nikon Z7 II touch to focus, and it would track that position. Let's get back into another clip so you can check out more of the scenes. So what I'm actually doing here is I'm focusing on two separate points as I dolly in or push in above the bar. That's going to be the characters up front, so the talent by the bar I'm actually focusing on first. And then as I cross over the bar and the main talent gets closer to the camera, I'm tapping on the tie knot on his chest and focusing on that all the way through as I slowly push in. Check it out. Let's see what that looks like. So I've already set my focus to be the foreground, as I mentioned earlier. And now I'm actually hitting record. I'm going to push in. And as I push in, I'm going to tap his tie knot as the main talent gets closer. They clink the glasses together, and I just stay locked in the center there, letting my gimbal do all the work. And to see that full shot in motion, let's actually see it here. Tap to focus on the tie knot, go straight in, hold it on him. Let's talk about this shot really quickly. This shot is set up on a tripod, and I'm actually using eye autofocus, but containing it to a certain box within one of my options for my Z7 II focus settings. This is really good for situations where you may have a lot of people walking in the background, where you may have situations where other human eyes are actually going to be part of the shot, and you don't want the Z7 II to track anything else but the eyes in this bounding box. This was huge for this scene. Normally what you're doing is you're setting the camera to manual and having the talent not move back and forth so much so that the focus seems like it's actually always locked on the eyes. But in this case, I actually used the eye autofocus and tracked it for the entire shot. You can see how crisp and sharp it looks through the entire shot. It worked out really, really well. And if anybody else had walked through frame, which we had talked about having a more busy scene back there with the entire agency kind of walking around and doing their normal activities, I would have hated for it to automatically pick up somebody's eyes or try to focus on something else. Let's look at this next shot, which I think is one of my favorite shots. I'm actually using my DJI Ronin RS2 with the Z7 II, and I'm panning down towards the piano. These keys now are going to be in focus depending on where I've placed my red bounding box. In this case, I'm not using the red bounding box that is looking for eyes. I'm just using the red bounding box that is focusing on whatever is in that composition, and I can move this red bounding box to any side of the frame. I'm framing this shot where I know I'm going to end with the keys on the right side of my frame, so that's what I'm waiting for him to actually jab down onto the piano keys and hit that focus as soon as he lands there. Check it out. He hammers down on those keys. Since my bounding box was ready on those keys, when he hit in there, it was already in focus, ready to go. Something else that I think is really important to talk about is I'm traditionally a Nikon DSLR user. I've been using Nikon DSLR since 2005. And so the switch to mirrorless in 2018 was a big thing for me, especially since I was coming from the D850, which is touted as one of the best cameras in the entire world to this day. But here's the thing. I wanted to be able to have that smooth focus in video. I wanted focus points across my entire sensor. I wanted that EVF. Those features are the main reasons I moved to mirrorless. And I'm telling you, I cannot go back to a DSLR. I do not miss my D850. I'm so excited to be able to use this camera to create the things that I wasn't able to create before on my DSLR. And I can do it quicker and with more confidence. So if you guys are on the fence about switching from DSLR to mirrorless and you're a traditional Nikon user, there are F-mount lenses that I still use. And so with the FTZ adapter, I can lock those into my Nikon Z7 or my Nikon Z7 II. And let me tell you, they are fast to focus. I can still use eye autofocus. I can still use all these features that are awesome with the Z system, but I can use them on my f-mount lenses as well. I've upgraded to the 51.8 and the 24-70 2.8S, and I love those lenses way more than the previous ones, but I still have a 14-24 that I use all the time for real estate, and I still have a 7200 VR2 that I love to use too for portraits. So everything that I've had in the past, I've been able to transfer over, and the new system kills it in every way that I wasn't able to do before with my DSLR system. All right, guys, that's it for me. Hopefully that video was really informative and showed you how I'm using my Nikon Z7 II to really create quality work for my clients. Getting paid for this stuff is amazing, and my Nikon Z7 II helps me achieve that. By the way, Tulum and Hawaii are coming up. You don't want to miss those videos. Make sure and subscribe down below. Click the thumbs up, hit that bell, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them down below. I'll be sure to answer them as soon as I can. All right, guys, take care.